Hello my dear 10th graders, welcome back to our English literature class. Today we are going to discuss 3 important lessons from your textbook which hold a significant amount of weightage for your upcoming board examination. Not only this, we would also be discussing important explanation of each lesson, important PYQs and the most probable questions for your board exam as well. So we have designed a certain set of questions for you all which is available in the link that is available in the description box and the comment section. So please, without wasting time, tap the link that will redirect you to our PW app, join the batch and start revising from there. Please hurry and don't waste any time if you want to score wonderful marks in your exams. Now let's discuss the chapters that we are going to cover in today's class, right? We are going to cover the sermon at Benares. We are going to cover for Anne Gregory by W.B. Yeats, William Butler Yeats, followed by The Proposal by Anton Chekhov. We'll also be discussing important explanation, summary in pointers, extract based questions, short questions, PYQ based long questions as well, and the most probable questions. All right. So towards the end of the class, we'll also have a brief recap of the entire class that we would be the topics that we would be covering. All right, dear students. So you see a very beautiful visual on screen, and the title of the very first chapter is the Sermon at Benares. So through this particular chapter, we would delve deep into 2 phases of life of Gautam Buddha as well, right? So let's understand it deals with 2 phases, first phase of his life and second phase as well, right? First phase, we are being told that initially his name was Prince Siddharth, who was living a life of luxuries in his palace with his wife and his son, right? He had everything. He was enjoying all worldly possessions. He was enjoying all luxuries of life. And the second phase deals with when he got enlightened, right? And his name became right? And this part is the actual part of sermon. All right, dear students, please remember all these things, right? When he was 25, decided to all right. Now let's discuss some pointers, although I'll be explaining each pointer in detail as well. So let's pay attention. Gautam Buddha, known as Siddharth Gautam, was a prince in northern India, right? There are 2 phases of his life, as we have already come to know while I explained you just a few minutes ago. The first phase of his life deal with all luxuries that he enjoyed, right? While living in his palace with his son and his wife. He was living the life of luxuries, comfort, right? Until he had an encounter with the real suffering of life in the form of old age and sickness as well. All right, dear students. So at the age of 25, he decided to renounce, to leave all his worldly pleasures, all luxuries, all comfort, right? And went into the world to seek enlightenment. After 7 days, he got enlightened, right? And was known as Buddha. Then we have another important character in the story, Kisa Gautami, who had her only son who passed away, right, due to some reason, but she could not reconcile to her only son's death, right? She could not accept the reality of her son's death. So she went mad with sadness and she went from door to door so that somebody could help her. So what happened? Somebody from her neighborhood suggested her to go to Gautam Buddha and she went there. So let's see what happened later on. Eventually, she learned about Gautam Buddha and went to him pleading to bring her son back to life. So Gautam Buddha instructed her to bring some mustard seeds from a particular house where no near and dear one ever passed away, right? She went from door to door and she could not find even a single house where no one died or where no dear or near one passed away. So this particular incident taught her a very important lesson and exposed her to the reality of life and death as well, right? That death is inevitable and all mortal beings are subject to perish, and ultimately if we have taken birth we have to die. All right, Now, let's understand the pointers. The very first thing comes the background of the story, which is extremely important. So while you come across any text, you should have a clear idea of the background, the setting, right? So the story is based on the teachings of Gautam Buddha. We have clearly come to know this thing by this time. It focuses on human suffering, death, and acceptance of reality, that we have to accept the realities of life, and this is how life is, and it goes on, so we have to go with the flow, right? Kisa Gautami's tragedy. What was her tragedy? She had her only son who passed away, right? But she could not reconcile to her only son's death. So that's why what happened, Kisa Gautami was a young woman whose only son died. Overcome with grief, she refused to believe that her child was dead, right? So she went from house to house begging for medicine so that somebody could revive her deadly child, her dead child. All right. Now, meeting Buddha, when somebody from her neighborhood suggested her to go to Gautam Buddha, what happened? Let's see. Buddha listened calmly to all her problems. He asked her to bring a handful of mustard seeds, right? So this was the way of enlightenment only. What happened? The seeds had to come from a house where nobody had ever died, right? But this was not possible. Kisa Gautami went from house to house in Benares, in the whole Benares. Every house had experienced death of a loved one. So now this taught her a very important lesson, right? What's that? The ultimate reality of life and death as well, that death is inevitable, and we as mortal beings are subject to death, right? We have to accept the reality of death, the transience of life, that life, nobody is permanent here, right? We all are mortal beings and we are subject to die, right? Then realization and awakening. From this particular incident comes her realization and awakening of the truth. Kisa Gautami realized that death is universal. You cannot escape it. This is inescapable. She understood that no one could escape death, right? Her grief slowly turned into wisdom and acceptance. So this is the second part, second phase of the chapter, which is actually the sermon that took place at Benares, the first teaching that was given by Gautam Buddha, right, in Benares. So the Buddha's sermon, Buddha taught that life is full of sufferings, right? And we have to accept those sufferings of life, right? Desire and attachment cause pain. The wise do not grieve for the dead. He compared life to earthen pots that are bound to break, right? Or you can even compare life to a bubble also, which is short-lived but ultimately vanishes. All right, dear students. Now let's proceed towards the theme of the lesson, which is actually very important. The theme of the account, the sermon at Benares, is the inevitability of death. Anything that comes in this mortal world is bound to perish. Perish means to die. It means to die. Alright, the sermon at Benares reflects Buddha's wisdom and brings home the point that the principle of appearing and finally disappearing applies to every phase of life and to every individual as well. Right, the light that brightens must be consumed by darkness. In sum, everything in this world is temporary and is subject to decay. So please, while you mention or while you just come across any question that is being asked in your exam, please do not forget to mention these keywords. Right? And that everything in this mortal world is subject to decay. So these are the important keywords that you should remember Words like self-realization, awakening, inevitability of sufferings of life and death as well. All right, dear students, coming to the important message, it teaches us that life is full of sufferings and we have to face everything in life that comes our way. We have to stand strong and bear all those sufferings. We have to come stronger out of those, right? So then we come to know, it brings home the idea that death is inevitable and must submit to it if we want to rise above the life of frustration. So we must realize one thing in life, that life is temporary. We should understand that life, we should understand about the transience of life, that nothing is permanent in this world and everything in this mortal world is subject to decay. All right, dear students. So it also teaches us that it is futile, it is useless to grieve over the departed. One's grief makes one sick, and lamentations means regret, right, are never able to save the dead or bring them back to life. So what does it teach? It teaches us a very important lesson, that if you mourn or grieve the death of a near or dear one, that happens, that pain stays till a certain point of time, and then we should learn to move on, right? So in order to be blessed, one must keep oneself free from all sorrows and one must understand all these things. Now let's proceed towards important extract based questions which can be possibly asked this time from this particular chapter. The Buddha said the life of mortals, so we should know the meaning of mortals, which means as we human beings are mortals, right? So this world is troubled and brief and combined with pain, for there is not any means by which those who have not been born can avoid dying. After reaching old age, there is death. So there are certain stages of life, right? Even when you must have studied a poem, you must have read a poem, The Seven Ages of a Man by William Shakespeare also, it talks about the sequence, it talks about 7 different stages of life, right? And the last stage is this only, right? Of such a nature are living beings. Let's see the questions also. What does Buddha say about human life? That it is short, painful, uncertain, and is full of sufferings at the same time, right? And you cannot escape death ultimately. What truth of life is highlighted? Inevitability of death, that it is inescapable. You cannot escape death at any cost. Why does Buddha call life troubled and brief? It is full of sufferings. There are hardships. It is full of ups and downs. It is a roller coaster ride, as we say, right? Why? Because it is full of ups and downs and we have to come stronger out of those. So what message does Buddha want to convey through this particular statement? That we have to rise above all sufferings, right? And we have to be strong enough to face those obstacles, those sufferings and these type of situations in life, right? And this is how life is. Acceptance of death as a universal truth and detachment comes from worldly pleasures. That we should not be overly attached to somebody or something in life, right? That leaves us in pain. So this is how life is. Now let's proceed towards short questions which are very, very important. And in your previous year, if you talk about recent 5 years question papers, these questions have been repeatedly asked, right? We have also listed years as well. Analyze and evaluate the role of faith in A Letter to God and the Sermon at Benares. So both the lesson center around faith. Like Lencho had unshakable and unflinching faith in God. Likewise, in A Letter to God, like if we talk about, Lencho's faith shows his belief in God, helping him when he is. Likewise, in Sermon at Benares, Kisa Gautami's faith led her to meet Gautam Buddha, who enlightened her ultimately, right? Both stories show that faith teaches acceptance of life, realities, loss and suffering. You cannot escape, right? Because life is full of sufferings, right? Then next question, not from weeping will anyone obtain peace of mind. Validate this statement with reference to the story. If you get this particular statement, so first of all, you should clearly gauge an idea from this particular text. These lines have been taken, right? Buddha's teaching is shown when Kisa Gautami learns that weeping cannot bring back her son. So this was the ultimate lesson that she learned. Kisa Gautami learned that just weeping and weeping whole day and night will not bring her son back to life, right? Seeing that death happens to all, she realizes sorrow increases when we cling to the dead, and that acceptance gives peace. If you accept the fact, if you accept something that this has happened, now you cannot undo anything, right? So you will have less pain. But if you keep clinging to that pain, right, so what is going to happen? Nobody is going to help you out. Nobody will be able to help you out. It's that you will be in that vicious circle of pain and sufferings and you'll not be able to come out of it otherwise, right? So please understand these things. So I hope this is all clear. So coming to our next question, what did Buddha say about death and suffering? These are the realities and one must have to deal with these. Buddha taught that death and suffering are inevitable, something you cannot escape, something that can't be escaped. Right? Just like ripe fruits fall and pots break, mortals must die, the wise accept the truth and do not mourn endlessly. Right? So please be aware of all these things. This lesson is all about reawakening. I have mentioned these things again so that you can just clearly get to know these are the keywords that you need to mention. Right? So mentioning keywords in your questions, be it short or long, is very, very important. It leaves a very lasting impression on your examiner. It leaves a very good impression that the student has really studied in depth and knows about the lesson really well, right? So please be aware of all these pointers. Now coming to our next question, which is very, very important and has been asked recently in CBSE 2024 as well. What message might Buddha's story hold for those in power and privilege? That death does not discriminate. It does not see whether somebody is rich or poor. It has to come to all, right? And everybody has to experience death. Everybody has to meet their end, right? So the story teaches us that death is certain for all ages, regardless of the fact that somebody is rich or poor, irrespective of the power and position that somebody holds. Wealth and status cannot stop death, and everyone must accept that life's impermanence. That we should understand about the transience of life, right? So these are the keywords that should be included in your message as well. Coming to the next question that was asked in 2023, what did Siddharth Gautam come across by chance when he was about 25? He had an encounter with the real sufferings of life in the form of aged man, a funeral procession, and a monk begging for alms, right? So now you should also understand keywords in this question also. So what were the things, what were the incident that he came across? He saw an old man, a monk, a funeral procession as well. All right, dear students, so please remember all these things. Then next question, this was also asked in another set in CBSE 2023 question paper. Why did Kisa Gautami meet Gautam Buddha? How did Buddha change her life? Again, we got to know the same fact. She had her only son who passed away and she could not reconcile to her only son's death. So when her only son passed away, she was being suggested by somebody in her neighborhood to reach Gautam Buddha and seek his help. So when she went there, she was being asked by Gautam Buddha to bring some mustard seeds from a house where nobody died, but this was not possible. And this incident taught her a very important lesson about the inevitability of death, about the universality of death, which helped her accept reality and find peace in that, right? Now, the next question, what does the Buddha ask? What does the Buddha say about the world? That it is full of sufferings, death, sorrow. A wise person knowing all this should not mourn but accept life's truth, ultimate reality, and that is death, right? So this is the end that everybody has to meet. Now, through the story of Kisa Gautami, what did the Buddha preach to the common man? Again, the same thing, transience of life, right? Remember these keywords, transience of life, and inevitability of death. Dear students, one thing I would like to discuss here, that we are discussing these many number of questions for you all so that you can practice. from different sources, from CBSE question papers, 2023 question paper, 2024 question paper, 2022 question paper, and your SQPs, your sample question papers as well. So please prepare your exam. So please put in the best of your efforts to prepare for your exam, right? Now, how did Kisa Gautami learn that death is as normal as birth? So when going from door to door for mustard seed, when she could not find any single household that has not experienced any death, she understood the reality of life and she understood the universality of death at the same time, right? So that death is natural and universal. Now, next question, through the story of Kisa Gautami, what did he preach? We have already discussed this question and this was asked in 2022 as well. So please be aware that this particular question was asked in 2020 and 23. So the whole lesson, the sermon at Benares revolves around the awakening. So the whole lesson, the sermon at Benares revolves around preachings, moral teachings, awakening, self-realization, understanding the reality of life, transience of life, and inevitability of death. All right. So what lesson did Kisa Gautami learn the second time she failed to learn that first time? So in the first place, she could not understand the reality and she was so driven by grief that she did not accept, she did not reconcile to her son's death. But later in the second phase, she realized the inevitability of that death, that it has to come to everybody. Now we are going to proceed towards long questions which are extremely important, right, for your upcoming exam. Right? There can be a question based on message. Thematic questions can be there or a statement based question as well. From this particular chapter. Let's have a look. How did Buddha help Kisa Gautami over her grief? Learn how to present your answer in a better way as to score good marks, because exaggeration is not going to take you anywhere. Please stick to the word limit and not the page count. All right. So let's see. Again, we are going to just learn about enlightenment and awakening. Kisa Gautami was overwhelmed by the death of her only son. Buddha asked her to bring handful of mustard seed. Everywhere in the entire lesson, we see this mustard seed incident is the most important one. Right? So be it any question that you get in your board exam related to this particular chapter, please do not forget to mention about Kisa Gautami, realization, inevitability of death, transience of life, and how you are going to explain these keywords through the help of this incident only. All right, dear students. Now the next question, what does Buddha teach us about the nature of life and death? Again, the same thing. So you see, all the questions revolve around one central idea. Again, the same, I would use the same terms again: inevitability of death, universality of death, and impermanence of life. All right, the whole chapter is based on these two things. All right, Buddha teaches that life is short and full of sufferings and one has to accept these realities of life and ultimately move on, right? So he has also explained the entire thing. He has also explained this thing. So we get to know this thing through the example of Kisa Gautami as well. Now you know the rest of the story. All right. So I hope I don't have to explain again here. We have been discussing the same thing again and again, right? So because there is not much in the story. And as you know that less is more, although the chapter is not that much lengthy, still it covers two important aspects. It teaches us a very important lesson about life and death. All right. Now, the next question that has been asked in CBSE 2023, as ripe fruits are in danger of falling early, so mortals who are born are always in the danger of death. With this statement of Buddha, find out the moral values that Kisa Gautami learnt after the death of her child. This is going to be very, very interesting and very, very important for this examination 2026. Please mark this thing, right? Your thinking based question, value based question, right? This is value based question. And CBSE loves to ask value based questions from this particular chapter. So when Buddha compared mortals to ripe fruits, they may fall at any time, right? Ripe fruits fall first, right? He explained the inevitability of death through this particular incident. Kisa Gautami, devastated by her child's death, she could not reconcile to her child's death. She went from door to door seeking help, but when nobody could help her in this particular case, when nobody could help her, revive her child. What she did, when she was being suggested by somebody to seek help from Gautam Buddha, she ultimately went there and asked for help, and ultimately he asked her to bring those mustard seeds again, and then again we would be discussing the same incident. She could not find even a single household where nobody died. Coming to our next long question, which we have discussed in short format as well, please understand one thing, that faith is the center of this particular question, whether it is asked in a short format or a long format, right? Be it any type of question. So please do not forget to mention this term. Do not forget to lay your emphasis on faith. All right. So as we can clearly see in a letter to God, despite being completely devastated due to failure of his crops, Lencho had full faith in God. He had unshakable faith in God, which leads him write a letter asking for help, asking for 100 pesos. But if we talk about the sermon at Benares, faith takes a spiritual form, more deeper, right? It takes a deeper form here. Kisa Gautami's faith in Buddha's wisdom helped her move from grief to understanding. So it made her exposed to the reality of life and universality of death, right? She got to know this thing. She understood the true meaning of life and death, and that sorrow is not going to take her anywhere, right? So what happens then? While Lencho's faith is practical and grounded in material need, the faith in the sermon at Benares is deeper and leads to emotional transformation in a person. So what emotional transformation are we talking about? Like in Kisa Gautami's case, right? Now we are going to cover the second poem from your text, that is for Anne Gregory, which is a conversation between the poet and a young girl named Anne Gregory. All right, please remember that this poem is written by W.B. Yeats. Please remember these pointers, that this poem is a conversation. And Anne Gregory, right, who happens to be the granddaughter of a family friend. And what was the name of that friend? Lady Gregory. Right, let's delve deep into this beautiful poem with its beautiful stanzas, and let's see what poet has to say to Anne Gregory and all of us. So this is the stanza number 1. Let's see. Never shall a young man thrown into despair. So here the poet tells Anne Gregory to be very careful while choosing a man for herself, that she should look for a man who loves her for her real self, for her real inner self, for her qualities, for her heart, but not for her physical charm or physical appearance. He further goes on to say that by those great honey colored ramparts at your ear. So he had referred her hair to be honey colored, or you can say blonde or golden yellow. He described her hair on her face by comparing her hair to that of ramparts, which refer to high walls that protects the building, or that protects the forts or the walls of the castle, right? Love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair. Here you see ramparts have been compared to hair, right? Love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair. So he suggested her to go for a man, to choose a man who loves her for her real inner self, but not for her beautiful hair. All right, dear students. So here if we talk about the rhyme scheme, we come to know that the rhyme scheme is A, B, C, B, D, B. All right, and talking about literary devices, let's see. We have alliteration here. We have alliteration here. Then we have, in these two lines, we have enchantment also. Isn't it? And then you can see there is a word that has been repeated. Your has been repeated in this. So we can say there is repetition. which refers to a repetition of a certain phrase or a word in the poem. All right. So as we have discussed the first stanza, please remember literary devices. That ramparts, right? So there is metaphor. All right. And he tells her that she should look for a man All right. So please take a note of all these points. So coming to stanza number 2, in reply to the poet's suggestion, let's see what Anne Gregory said. She said, but I can get a hair dye now. If you get an extract based question, please let's see that this here I is Anne Gregory. She replied by saying that she would dye her hair in different colors like black, brown or carrot in order to test the true love of her man, that when she will change her hair color and when she will not look attractive, she will definitely come to know the true love, whether her man loves her for her real inner self, for her heart, or for her just for her physical charm or physical appearance, right? That young man in despair may love me for myself alone and not my yellow hair. She says in this way she may find a young man who loves her for her inner beauty but not for her charm. All right, talking about literary devices, we have already discussed A, B, C, B, D, B, right? Then we have alliteration here. If we talk about B sound, that is getting repeated, we have alliteration. If we talk about other words like, is there any such word that you find similar? May love me, you have alliteration here as well, right? Then you have enjambment in these two lines. There is enjambment, there is alliteration in this particular stanza. All right, dear students. So now coming to the third stanza, again here, I heard an old religious man. I refers to the poet again. Let's see what he says. But yester here refers to yesterday. He referred to an old religious man, right, who referred to a scripture, who referred to a text to prove his point that only God, my dear, could love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair. He says in the whole world, there is nobody in the whole world who loves you unconditionally except one entity, that is God, that it is only God who loves all human beings, who loves us for who we are, right? No matter what, but nobody else. Literary devices, rhyme scheme, ABCB that we have discussed. Then we have anaphora, clearly evident in this, that is being repeated, right? Then alliteration, if we talk about the words like yellow, why, right? Then we have he had, alliteration is there. And there is enjambment in these. All right, dear students, I hope you have understood the text really well. Now let's recall the poem through these pointers so that you can clearly get an idea. The poem explores the idea that superficial attributes such as hair color can attract attention but not true love. The speaker questions whether anyone can love us unconditionally or selflessly. Then she contemplates the possibility of changing her hair color in order to test the true love of her lover. Then the poem highlights a desire for genuine and authentic connections. All right. Then we have the speaker encounters an old religious man who claims that it is God only who love all human beings, right? The encounter with the religious man raises questions on the authenticity of love, right? Then we have the next point. It suggests that love based solely on external attributes may be shallow and fleeting. Somebody who loves you for your physical charm, for your physical beauty, right, cannot be regarded as a true lover, right? The speaker's contemplation reflects a universal desire for genuine and authentic relationships and acceptance of true love. The poem explores the complexities of relationships and search for deep connections based on the inner qualities. And what is that important thing which the writer highlights here? What's that? Very important. Very, very important. Right? So this is the most important thing that you need to remember, right? Now, all right, so please understand all these things. Major keywords of the poem. So I hope all clear. So proceeding towards the theme of the poem, which centers around an age-old question, what true love actually is. Is it love for the physical appearance, physical charm, or beyond that? Or is it love for the real inner self, for the heart, right? So he says men fall in love with women who are physically attractive and charming, but women on the other hand perhaps would like to be loved for their inner beauty, their virtues and qualities of their head and heart, right? They want to be loved for their real self. They want to be loved for their real beauty, which lies in heart but not in looks. Focusing on the message that this powerful poem conveys, so the writer through this particular poem conveys a deep message that true love is not confined to physical charm or physical beauty, and that it rises above all superficialities, it rises above selfishness. Another important message that the poet conveys through this poem is that it is important for all human beings not to judge others on the basis of appearances or physical charm, right? But to appreciate others on the basis of virtues and qualities of head and heart. All right, now let's discuss extract based questions from this poem. By those great honey-colored ramparts at your ear, love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair. This extract was asked in 2020 question paper, right? Let's see the questions related to it. The lady's hair is compared to ramparts' ears, honey, despair. The lady's hair has been compared to ramparts, which means high walls that protects a fort or a castle, right? Then we have the young man has fallen in love with the lady of for her wealth, social position, looks or mind. Definitely looks, right? Not for her wealth, not for her social position, and not for her mind. Coming to the next question, name the poem and the poet. We know the name of the poem for Anne Gregory, written by W.B. Yeats, or you may say William Butler Yeats. Fourth question, according to the poet, the lady wants the young man to love her for her looks or for her real self. Yes, for her real inner self. Right? Let's now proceed towards short questions from this particular poem. First question being, do you think you can love a person for his or her inner beauty alone and not care about physical appearance? Justify. Whenever you see these words, whenever you come across these type of words in a question, please do not forget to justify your point, to validate your point. So in this poem for Anne Gregory, the poet shows that beauty is temporary. The young man is attracted towards physical charm, physical looks, right? Not her inner qualities, and realizes this and decides to dye her hair ultimately so she may find true love for her, the one who loves her not for her looks but for her real inner self. Next question, which was asked in CBSE 2023, the poet in the poem for Anne Gregory conveys beauty as temporary. It talks about message. I have already told you this thing, that message of the poem is very, very important, that we should not judge somebody or we should not judge others based on their appearances but on their virtues. All right. Now we are going to discuss a very important long question that would cover the central idea of the poem, the theme and the message all in one package. Right, let's see the question, and this was asked in CBSE 2019, a very important question. based on message and theme, right? You can call it a thematic question. The poet in the poem for Anne Gregory conveys that we should give importance to inner beauty but not the physical appearance. Elaborate how you are going to do it. So in the conversation that took place between the speaker and Anne Gregory, let's see, the poet shows that true love lies in inner beauty, the real inner self, the beauty of the heart, but not in the looks, right? So he says physical beauty is temporary, physical appearance is temporary, it may fade away with time, but what happens with the true beauty, what happens with the beauty that lies in the heart, it remains forever, right? The speaker tells that young men like her, maybe for her looks, for her beautiful hair, but not for who she actually is. To which she replied that she wanted to be loved by someone who loved her for her real inner self, for her heart, but not for her looks, right? Not for her appearance, right? The poet explains that only God values beauty. So he replied her by saying that nobody in the whole world can love us unconditionally except one entity, and that is God, who loves us, who loves all human beings for who they are. All right, dear students. So it's a humble request to all my students, whenever you'll be watching this video, please pay attention to all questions that have been discussed in the class, because there won't be even a single question in your exam that would be asked beyond all the pointers that we have covered in classes. All right, dear students. Dear students, now we proceed towards the third chapter of our class, that is the proposal, written by none other than Anton Chekhov, right? So please note down the name of the writer, right? Now let's understand that this is a Russian play. Having comical elements, involves farce, right? Three quarrelsome characters, right? Including Ivan Vasilovich Lomov, Natalia Stepanovich Chubukov, and Natalia's father, Stefan Stepanovich Chubukov. Talking about their character traits, let's learn that Ivan, a nervous landowner, unmarried, suffering from anxiety and hypochondria. We have Natalia, a strong-willed, argumentative woman, right? Then we have Stefan Stepanovich Chubukov, who is Natalia's father, who seems practical but quarrelsome. All right, now let's understand the story in pointers. It opens up with Lomov's visit to Natalia's place, where he goes to propose her, but ends up involving in heated arguments. Let's see how. Lomov's visit Chubukov's house wearing formal clothes, which surprises Chubukov. Like, Chubukov thinks, why Lomov is in so formal outfit as he has come today, right? So for what may be the reason for his visit to our house, he appears tensed, nervous, constantly talking about his health problems, which we refer to as hypochondria, right? Lomov says he has come with a serious proposal, proposing Natalia. So this is the reason why he has come to their place, right? So though he struggles to say it directly. So the main reason for which Lomov's visit Natalia's place, right, was just to propose her. Since he could not say this thing directly, since he could not propose her directly, so he has to face a lot of struggle, right? Then talking about marriage proposal, he says Lomov finally reveals that he has come there to propose Natalia, right? Then he explains that he considered marriage not just as an emotional bond, but as a logical decision, not an emotional one. Then he further goes on to tell about his property, about his income, his social status, justifying himself as a suitable match for Natalia. Now we come towards one of the most important yet entertaining part of the play, which is Oxen Meadows dispute. When Lomov went to Natalia's place in order to propose her, what happened? They discusses so many things, and in the meantime, when Natalia hears about the proposal, she becomes so excited. However, a dispute arises over the Oxen Meadows ownership, right? So they started having a heated argument, which later turned into a argument, right? So what happened? Natalia believed that the Oxen Meadows belong to them, whereas Lomov believed that it belongs to him, right? So Natalia strongly claims that the meadows belongs to her family and not Lomov's. The argument becomes so heated, loud and absurd. What is the meaning of absurd? It means weird, right? So then Lomov's breakdown. After having so many arguments about the same, so what happened? Suddenly his health began to deteriorate and he suffers from palpitations and anxiety, and he starts to faint. Chubukov insults Lomov, calling him troublesome, calling him weak, right, that he could not handle anything. Then Natalia later learns from her father that Lomov came there for marriage proposal, and again she requested her father to bring Lomos back. She became excited and there was a change of heart. So what happened then? Natalia immediately regrets her behavior and she became so desperate and asked her father to bring Lomov back, right? And she started behaving in a very polite and sweet. This scene is also very, very important. It also talks about dispute. So they started getting involved in an argument that involved their dogs, Squeezer and Guess, right? So Lomov returns and starts talking about his dog Guess, that he is far superior than Squeezer, right? So another argument begins about whether Guess or Squeezer is the better dog. I already told you this. The argument again becomes intense and ridiculous, right? Leading to a heated discussion. Then, now earlier this thing was about Oxen Meadows, about its ownership. Then they started having an argument again. The dogs also, about their dogs. Then again he was about to faint. Again he got anxious, right? Then what happened? Chubukov quickly declares them engaged, fearing Lomos might die. So Natalia's father got so scared, he got frightened. At this time Lomov may not die, so immediately he declared their engagement, right? So this appears to be ridiculous and so funny, so comical incident. Lomov agrees without fully understanding what is happening. He could not even understand, he could not even process what has happened, right? The play ends with Chubukov telling them to start kissing, showing the comic ending. So we could see that the play did not end on a sensitive or on a serious note. Rather it ended on a very lighter and comical note. So these are some unusual things which do not happen in real life, right? So talking about a marriage proposal, talking about the deal, they considered marriage to be a very logical decision rather than being an emotional one, right? Talking about the theme of the play, this play is farce. What is the meaning of farce? That involves comical elements, something which is comical. It involves materialism. So it talks about that people of this age, this is being a Russian playwright, people used to give more importance to materialistic things, to wealth, to property rather than relationships, right? Talking about marriage as a business deal, they used to consider marriage as a business deal, as a logical decision rather than being a respectful or an emotional one, right? Pride and possessiveness, trivial disputes turning serious, just like we talk about in case of Oxen Meadows and dogs dispute, right? Then it shows how property and status matter more than relationships, love and emotions. So now discussing the title justification, very important. The title, The Proposal, is ironic in terms of its surface meaning, right? The title of the play is The Proposal, whereas it leads to arguments and conflicts in the later section of the play. The proposal becomes a source of comedy rather than love, right? So this is what makes the play, what makes the title ironical. Let's now understand the message, what the play gives to the readers. Human beings often prioritize wealth and property over relationships, over feelings, over emotions. Trivial issues, petty issues. Trivial means petty issues can destroy peace when driven by ego and pride, just like we have seen in case of Lomov and Natalia when they involved in a heated discussion in an argument involving Oxen Meadows and their dogs dispute. Then we have marriage without understanding becomes meaningless and mechanical, right? Now, keywords. I keep telling you the same thing in all my classes. Whichever text you read, be it a prose or a poem, you must memorize some keywords related to that particular text that help you in gaining good marks at the time while you write your answers, right? See, this is fast, marriage as a business, materialism, property disputes, hypochondria, anxiety, getting faint, irony. There is irony in the title, right? So comedy of manners, which involves satirical elements, right? It's like, as we see in upper social status, upper social sections of the society, we see how rich class, how upper class people consider marriage as a business deal. Let's now proceed towards extract-based questions, which are really important for you to understand. And if you get any extract-based question from this particular play, it may revolve around two incidents, Oxen Meadows incident or dogs dispute. And this extract is one of them. Let's see, Lomov, Guess, is a thoroughbred. Natalia, Squeezer, is better. He is more active and alert. Let's see the first question. Why does Lomov consider Guess superior? Because it's a thoroughbred, bought at high price and belongs to a good breed, right? So based on its quality, he considers his dog Guess superior than Squeezer. Then coming to second question, what argument does Natalia give in favor of Squeezer? She says, despite getting Squeezer at a cheaper price, it is more active, alert and efficient. Alright, so please remember these things, showing that performance matters more than pedigree, more than food, right? So coming to the next question, what does this argument show about characters? That they both are stubborn, quarrelsome and obsessed with trivial matters, right? So both lack maturity, that we can clearly got out of this. So coming to our next question, name the literary device used to make this scene comic, which involves irony and force, right? How does this dispute affect Lomo physically? He started to suffer from palpitations, anxiety, hypochondria. All right. So these are the things that you need to remember about him. Now let's proceed towards short questions which are really important, and we have collected these questions from SQPs and previous year question papers so that you may get an idea what type of questions are asked, right? So CBSE sometimes ask you same questions with little twisting in words, but idea remains the same, right? For example, you have this question, justify the title. I have already told you this, the title is very important, right? So how you're going to justify it? Let's see. Talking about the title, you have to mention that it's ironical. Then you have to mention characters. How they got involved in a silly argument over Oxen Meadows. And please don't forget to mention Oxen Meadows incident. And dogs dispute as well. So these are the value points for this answer, right? So please keep these points in mind and frame your answer really well. Coming to our next important question, let's see. Engaging in discussions and disputes rarely leads to problem resolution. How? You are going to support it, right? So if you keep getting involved in silly fights and illogical arguments, you won't find any way of escaping it and you won't find any ways of resolution. Just like we have seen in the case of proposal, when Lomo visits Natalia's place in order to propose her on a very serious note, but end up getting involved in a heating argument, right? First of all, about the ownership of the Oxen Meadows, and then about the superiority of their respective dogs, Squeezer or Guess. These conflicts delay the actual purpose of the visit and show that petty arguments hinder solutions rather than help resolve everything. Alright, coming to our next question, we can see what arguments do Lomov and Natalia give over the superiority of their dogs. Lomov tried his best to prove his dog, his Guess, superior, and Natalia also did the same, right? So Natalia argues that Squeezer is better as it is active, alert and more efficient, right? So even though it was obtained cheaply, proving ability matters than the cost, right? Next question. Lomo and Natalia trade charges against each other about the ownership of Oxen Meadows. Very important question, right? Lomo claims that Oxen Meadows belongs to his family as they were given to his aunt's grandmother and are mentioned in the official land documents. Natalia counters that the Meadows belongs to her family because her ancestors has used the land for decades, showing how both of them stubbornly fight over property, right? So they fought over the ownership of the Oxen Meadows. So now let's proceed towards important long questions which have been collected from SQPs and previous year question papers for you all. Let's have a look. The first being one of the most important questions. What idea do you form about the real purpose of marriage amongst Russians from Chubukov's statement? Go there is a merchant, come for his goods. The statement shows that Russians during Chekhov's age were materialistic, and the basic purpose behind matrimonial alliances, behind marriages, was particularly enhancing the economic status, right? So that's why Chubukov talks of a merchant seeking his goods, Natalia, right? So they considered marriage to be a commodity, right? Rather than being a connection, rather than being an emotional bond. Coming to our next question, why was Natalia surprised to see Lomov in that evening dress? Because this was so unusual of Lomov to dress up in that formal outfit and go to Natalia's place in order to propose her, right? So she was completely unaware of this particular reason. Lomov was Natalia's neighbor and she did not expect a formal visit from him. She first thought that he must be going to some ball, or you may say a party, right? And then admired his look, right? Because he looked so unusual that day. So that thought that he had come to propose her did not even cross her mind even once, because since she did not have any romantic feelings for him, and still the irony is that still she agrees to marriage. Coming to our next question, three characters in the play are a pack of fools. Which character, according to you, think is the most foolish? So this question is open to interpretation, so you can justify your own reason, stating which character you find the most foolish one. So Lomov is foolish because instead of proposing her directly, he got involved in heating arguments over oxen meadows ownership and dogs dispute as well. Then we talk about Natalia, who is also immature, right, and stubborn. And talking about Stepan Chubukov, who is expected to behave in a very sensible manner as he is happy about Lomov's marriage proposal for his daughter, right, who was not even 25 years of age, but also very desperate to marry her. All right, proceeding towards our next question, has Lomov come to propose Natalia out of a feeling of love for her, or are there some other reasons for it? So he also did not have any romantic feelings for Natalia. It's just that there were certain grounds on which he found Natalia to be a suitable match for him. For example, what were those reasons? Lomov thinks that Natalia is an excellent housekeeper, not bad looking even. She looked fine, right? She looked fine in appearance, right? And is well educated at the same time. And just because he was advancing towards old age, so this shows that he does not love her. However, he's after that he's advancing towards age, and poor health might deprive him of marriage to anyone else. So he thought to marry Natalia just because he was not finding any other girl at the same time, right? Now, the next question. Initially, Lomov and Chubukov try to sound very sweet and courteous, polite. How do the arguments on oxen meadows and their dogs, Guess and Squeezer, reveal their real selves? So what does it reveal about their personalities, right? Let's have a look at the answer as well. So coming to this particular answer, let's try to understand. Initially, both the characters treated each other with great courtesy and politeness, right? Each time Lomov addressed Chubukov, he used the prefixes like honored, and Chubukov also at the same time used prefixes like dears and darlings while addressing Lomov, right? Though in the heart of his heart, he had no intentions to help Lomov. However, their heated argument started over the topics of the superiority of their dogs and oxen meadows. So soon the mask of gentleness from their faces began to slip, right? They did not only abuse each other, but their ancestors as well, right? So what happened? Lomov called Chubukov a land grabber and not a neighbor. He threatens to drag him to court. At the same time, on the other hand, Chubukov in turn called Lomov a pettifogger and tells him that his mother ran away with some architect and that his whole family was a lunatic, was mad. He calls his grandfather a drunkard, right, and shames him by saying one thing or the other. Soon, all their decency vanished and they behaved like mannerless people, as if they have no decency, right, in their behavior. All right, dear students, so please read this question completely, read the answer and try to gain an idea, try to gauge an idea what type of questions can be asked in your board question paper this time based on these many questions. All right, now we proceed towards one of the most important section of our class, that is recapitulation. So talking about the topic, the chapter, the sermon at Benares, what do we come to know? We come to know about life of Gautam Buddha, all right. Then we come to know about two phases as well. In the first phase, his name was Prince Siddharth, when he used to live in his palace and enjoyed his life full of luxuries and comforts, right? He renounced all that royalty at the age of 25. Then mention about Kisa Gautami as well, who could not reconcile to her only son's death. But later, when he approached Gautam Buddha and when she was being asked to carry mustard seeds, to bring mustard seeds from a house in which no near or dear one had ever passed away, which was not possible. So this particular incident taught Kisa Gautami a very important lesson about transience of life and inevitability of death. Right? Then talking about the poem for Anne Gregory, It is written by W.B. Yeats. So it's a conversation, right, between the poet and this girl, right? Talks about physical charm and divine beauty, which means real inner self. So what is that important message that it conveys to the readers? That is divine in nature. All right? Right? Then coming to the next chapter, the proposal, which is written by Anton Chekhov, right? Talks about materialism, marriage as a deal. Remember, there is irony in title, as it is not about romantic relationship, rather a logical decision, right? First, and talk about Russian times and their materialistic nature, especially the rich class. So dear students, I hope you are able to understand all 3 chapters after watching this particular video. And if you feel there is any doubt, any query related to any of these lessons that we have discussed in the class, please post in the comment section. We'll definitely welcome all your queries and comments, right? And yes, besides all this, please do not forget to tap the link given in the description box to practice more and more questions that we have given in the form of DPP. So dear students, for more sessions like this on language and literature, please stay tuned with us on our PW platform. Till then, have a wonderful evening ahead. Thank you so much.